Nobody at the Pine Rest Motel called Room 12 a home anymore. They called it a liability. They called it a storage problem. They called it one more thing the new owner had to clear out before winter rates went up. But to 82-year-old Nora Whitfield, Room 12 was the last place in that roadside motel where her name still meant something. She had folded towels in the laundry room for 27 years. She had scrubbed coffee stains from sheets after truckers left before sunrise. She knew every dryer, every loose pipe, every door that needed a gentle lift before the latch would catch. And beside her was Duke, her gray-muzzled German shepherd. Duke was not young anymore. His hips were stiff on cold mornings, and one ear folded sideways when he was tired. But he still watched Nora the way a good dog watches the last safe person in the world. When someone spoke over her, he stepped between her shoes and the rest of the room, not growling, not threatening, just reminding everyone that she was not alone. That morning, the motel office smelled like lemon cleaner and fresh paint, which was how Nora knew something had changed. Behind the counter, Caleb Mercer did not look up from his tablet. Caleb was polite in a way that made every word feel already decided. "Mrs. Whitfield," he said, "we talked about this?" "No," Nora said. Her voice was thin, but it did not shake. "You talked. I listened because my manners are better than yours." Duke's ears moved. Caleb finally looked at Duke, then back at Nora. "Room 12 is not a residence. It was kindness from the previous owner. But we have to bring the property into compliance." Nora looked past him, toward the laundry room at the end of the cracked walkway. Its little square windows were fogged from the dryers. "I worked here before you were born," she said. "I respect that," Caleb replied too quickly. "No, you don't." His smile tightened. "You may be confusing past employment with current rights." The word confusing sat in the air like something sour. Duke turned his head sharply toward Caleb. He simply stared. Caleb slid a paper across the counter. "You have 48 hours to remove your personal belongings from room 12 and the rear laundry area," he said. "After that, anything left behind will be discarded." "Discarded," Nora repeated. "My husband's coat is in that room." "I understand this is emotional," Caleb said. "No," she said. "You understand forms, not things." Nora folded the notice once, carefully, as if neatness could protect her from what it said. Duke pressed his shoulder against her leg. "There's a misunderstanding," Nora said. "Mr. Hanley said I could keep the back room as long as I needed." Caleb's eyes softened just enough to look practiced. "Mr. Hanley passed away 3 years ago. We do not have any record of that arrangement. Not every promise lives in a computer." "That may be true," Caleb said. "But without documentation, we can't build policy around memory." "Memory." He said it like it was a leak, a weakness, something old people carried because they had nothing stronger. Nora felt her cheeks burn. She had misplaced her glasses and once put salt in the sugar bowl. But she also knew the difference between a misplaced spoon and a promise made beside a hospital bed. "I'm not confused," she said. Caleb lowered his voice. "No one is saying that, you just did." For the first time, Duke made a sound, low and brief. It's not a growl meant to scare, but a warning from somewhere deep in his chest. Caleb stepped back. Nora gave the leash a tug. "Duke, easy." The dog obeyed at once, though his eyes stayed on Caleb. Nora walked slowly back toward room 12. Duke matched her pace. He never pulled when her knees were bad. Room 12 was at the far end, next to the laundry room. It had a heater that clanked, a sink that dripped, and curtains Nora had hemmed from an old flowered sheet after Harold died. On the little table were her pill organizer, a chipped mug, a loaf of bread, peanut butter, Duke's food tin, and 3 cans of soup, stacked like a promise that tomorrow would still need supper. Inside, everything looked smaller than it had that morning. Her narrow bed, Harold's coat on the hook, Duke's water bowl, a laundry basket of towels. She still could not stop folding. Then Duke stopped in front of the closet and stared at a brown paper sack near the door. Nora had not put it there. The sack was folded at the top and sealed with a strip of masking tape. Across the front, in thick black marker, someone had written trash. For a moment, Nora did not understand what she was seeing. Then she recognized the frayed blue edge sticking out beneath the fold. Duke's old blanket, not the one he slept on now. The first one, the worn, patched blanket she had kept in the laundry room cabinet for years because Duke still searched for it whenever he was frightened. Nora reached for the sack, but Duke moved faster. He gripped the blue edge gently between his teeth and pulled. Duke, wait. The masking tape ripped. The sack toppled, spilling dust, dryer lint, and old fabric onto the floor. The blanket slid out in a faded heap. Duke placed one paw on it and looked at Nora with an urgency she had seen only twice before. Nora lowered herself carefully to the floor. One hand on the bed frame, one hand on Duke's shoulder. What is it, boy? Duke nosed the blanket with purpose. He pushed at one corner, then lifted his head and whined. His nose returned to the same seam again and again. Nora's breath caught. The corner he kept touching was not one she had patched. The stitches were small and dark, almost hidden in the warm blue cloth. Someone had sewn that corner closed. Outside, Caleb's voice carried across the walkway. Clear the back cabinet first, he said. Anything in bags goes out today. Not 48 hours, today. Nora's hands trembled as she pulled the blanket into her lap. Duke stood over her, blocking the door with his body. Not because she commanded him, but because he understood the shape of danger before people gave it a name. The seam was thick under her fingers. Something small and hard rested inside. Nora stared at the word trash on the torn paper sack, then at Duke's anxious eyes, then at the hidden corner of the blanket everyone else had decided was worthless. For the first time that morning, the notice in her pocket did not feel like the only important paper in the room. Something had been sewn into Duke's first blanket, something he still remembered, and if Caleb had thrown it away before she looked, the truth might have gone out with the motel garbage. Before sunset, Nora did not cut the seam right away. For almost a full minute, she sat on the floor of room 12, with Duke's old blanket across her knees, listening to Caleb's footsteps move in and out of the laundry room next door. Nora had learned that shouting made certain people feel powerful. It let them say you were upset instead of listening to why. So she breathed through the ache in her knees and ran one finger over the hidden stitches. Duke sat close, one front paw resting on the blanket. His nose kept touching the same closed corner, soft and careful, as if he knew the object inside mattered, but did not know how to explain it. You remember this, don't you? Nora whispered. Duke blinked once. The blanket had come from the motel laundry years earlier, when it was still bright blue and too thin for guest beds. Mr. Hanley had been ready to throw it out because the edge was torn. Nora had taken it, washed it twice, cut away the worst of the fray, and given it to the trembling German shepherd she had found behind the dumpster during freezing rain. Duke had not been Duke then. He had been a soaked, rib-thin dog with a chain mark around his neck and no name anyone bothered to speak. Nora still remembered the sound he made when she opened the laundry room door. Not a bark, not a growl. A broken sound from an animal who had learned that hope could hurt. She had wrapped him in that blue blanket, fed him warm water and torn pieces of bread, and called the county shelter before sunrise. The shelter had been full. The deputy had shrugged. Mr. Hanley had said, "Let her keep him until we figure it out." They never figured it out. Duke figured Nora out instead. Outside, a metal cabinet scraped across concrete. Nora stiffened. "Careful with that," Caleb called. If it's not tagged for use, it goes. Tagged for use. She reached into the sewing tin on her table. The tin had once held Danish cookies. Now it held needles, buttons, thread, safety pins, and a small pair of silver scissors Harold had bought her when arthritis made the old ones hard to grip. Her thumb would not slide easily through the handle. She tried once, winced, then tried again. Duke whined. "I know," she said. "I am slow, not helpless." She cut the first stitch, then the second, then the third. The seam opened like a mouth that had kept quiet too long. Inside was a thin piece of folded wax paper. Tucked within it, darkened with age, was a metal dog tag. Nora held it to the light. Not Duke's current brass tag. This tag was older. Oval, silver, stamped with a name she had not seen in years. Buddy. Below the name was a number, and beneath that, in smaller letters, Pine Rest Motel. Nora's fingers went cold. "Buddy," she said. Duke's ears lifted. The name passed through the room like a draft from an old door. Nora knew that name. Everybody who had worked at the Pine Rest, before the new paint and new locks, knew that name. Buddy had belonged to a boy named Miguel Rivera, the son of a housekeeper who cleaned rooms in the summers. The boy had been 11, small for his age, always carrying a paperback book in his back pocket. He had loved a stray German shepherd that waited near the vending machines, a dog too wary to belong to anyone, too loyal to leave. Once Miguel started sieving breakfast sausage for him. Then Miguel's mother lost her job. Then they left then. One wet February night, the dog vanished too. People said the animal ran off. People said strays do that. People said Miguel cried for 2 days. But children cried over many things. Nora had never believed it. She remembered Miguel standing in the laundry doorway, clutching that blue blanket because it smelled like the dog. She remembered promising him that if she ever learned what happened, she would keep the truth safe, until someone came back for it. But years folded over years. Miguel never returned. Mr. Hanley grew sick. Harold died. The old motel changed hands, and Nora became the woman people spoke around instead of to. She turned the tag over. There, scratched faintly into the metal, were 3 letters, DKW. Nora frowned, her initials. Duke leaned close and sniffed the tag. He did not wag his tail. He went very still. A knock struck the door. Not a polite knock. 2 fast taps, then the handle turned. Duke was on his feet before the door opened. Caleb stepped in carrying a clipboard. The moment he saw the blanket spread open, his face changed. It was quick, but Nora had spent decades noticing stains other people missed. "What are you doing?" Caleb asked. Nora folded her hand around the tag. "Looking at my property. That bag was marked for disposal. It was marked wrong." Caleb's eyes dropped to the blanket. "Mrs. Whitfield, I am trying to keep this simple, so am I. You need to let the staff clear out unsafe clutter. That blanket belonged to my dog. It was in the motel laundry storage because I worked here." He exhaled through his nose. "This is exactly what concerns me. You seem to have trouble separating personal belongings from business property." Nora heard the trap before he finished building it. If she argued, she was emotional. If she stayed quiet, he would take the blanket. If she mentioned the hidden tag, he would ask to see it. Duke solved the first part for her. He stepped forward, picked up the blanket in his teeth, and backed slowly toward Nora's bed. He did not tear it. He did not shake it. He carried it like something living. Caleb watched him. "That dog cannot interfere with removal," he said. "He's not interfering," Nora said. "He's remembering." Caleb looked at her in a way that made the room feel colder. Then his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and walked back toward the doorway. "You have until tomorrow afternoon. After that, I'll have to involve the county office." When he left, Nora waited until his footsteps faded. Then she opened her fist. The old tag rested against her palm, small enough to be lost in a trash bag, heavy enough to pull years back into the room. Duke laid the blanket at her feet and pressed his nose to the letters on the metal. Nora suddenly remembered something else. Miggle's mother had once said, Buddy wore 2 tags because one kept falling off. One with his name. One with a phone number that did not belong to the Riveras. Now she looked toward the laundry room, where Caleb's men were clearing out the last cabinets from the old days. If the second tag had been sewn inside the blanket, then someone had hidden it there. And if the tag still carried the motel's name, then Buddy had not simply run away from Pine Rest. Someone at Pine Rest had known exactly where he was. Duke would not leave the laundry room after that. Nora tried to guide him back into room 12, but he planted all 4 paws on the cracked concrete and stared through the dusty window, as if someone had called his name from inside. The laundry room had always been loud in Nora's memory. Machines thumping, coins dropping, steam hissing from old pipes. Now it sounded hollow. Caleb's men had dragged 2 cabinets into the walkway. One was stripped. The other leaned near the dumpster. The cabinet where Nora had kept spare towels, and the blue blanket Duke had guarded for years. The door was unlocked. Nora looked toward the office. No one was watching. That does not mean we are sneaking, she told Duke. It means we are checking what they should not have touched. She pushed the laundry room door open. The smell met her first. Warm dust, old detergent, wet lint trapped somewhere behind the dryers. Beneath it was something sharper, a trace of fresh adhesive from Caleb's new labels. Everything had a label now. Towels, cleaning supplies, discard, private. Nora hated that last one. It had been stuck across the small supply closet, where Mr. Hanley once kept the old guest ledger. The closet had no handle anymore, only a new silver lock. Duke went straight to it. He sniffed the bottom edge once, then sat down with his shoulder pressed against the door. No, Nora whispered. Not that one. Duke did not move. Nora's hand went to the old tag in her sweater pocket. Buddy, Pine Rest Motel. 3 scratched letters on the back. Why would anyone hide that tag inside Duke's first blanket? She closed her eyes, trying to summon the memory without forcing it. Michael in the doorway. The blue blanket. Rain on the windows. A man's voice in the office. It's not Mr. Hanley. Someone angry. Someone saying that dog is going to cost us from outside came, Caleb's voice. I told you. Nothing from that room goes into the guest units. Trash or storage only. Nora turned quickly and knocked over a plastic laundry basket. The sound cracked across the room. Caleb appeared in the doorway seconds later. His eyes moved first to the locked closet, then to Duke, then to Nora. This area is not safe for you, he said. I worked in this room longer than you have been alive. That does not make it safe. No. It makes me qualified to know when somebody changed it. Caleb stepped inside. Changed what? Nora pointed to the supply closet. That door never had a lock. It does now. Because old records are private. Private for whom? His polite smile returned. Mrs. Whitfield, this is becoming a pattern. There it is again. That look you get before you decide. I am confused. I am concerned about your fixation. My dog is fixated. I am curious. Duke's tail gave one slow thump. Caleb crossed his arms. The county office will be here tomorrow to review occupancy and animal compliance. Animal compliance? Nora repeated. You mean Duke. Room 12 is not your home. The sentence was quiet. That made it worse. Duke rose then, not lunging, not barking, simply standing taller beside her. His body pressed lightly against Nora's thigh, steadying her before she realized she had begun to sway. Caleb noticed. His voice softened. You may need more support than this property can provide. Support. Another word that could mean help or removal, depending on who held the clipboard. Nora placed one hand on Duke's head. I need what was kept with that blanket, she said. Caleb's face changed again. Almost nothing, almost too small to name. But Duke heard something. Nora did not. A quick shift of breath, a tightening in the room. He turned his head toward the locked closet and whined. Caleb stepped between Duke and the door. That was his mistake. Caleb Mercer had just become very interested in a closet he claimed held only old business records. Nora nodded. "Once all right," she said. "I'll cooperate tomorrow. But I want Mrs. Alvarez here." "Who, Lena Alvarez?" "She cleaned rooms with me. She knew Miguel Rivera and his mother." "This is not a community hearing." "No," Nora said. "It is a memory problem. You keep saying mine is bad. Let's bring another one." Caleb gave a small laugh with no humor in it. "You can call whoever you want to change the records." Nora looked at the locked closet. "Maybe not," she said. "But records look different when the right person explains why they were kept." Caleb left without answering. Nora slowly lowered herself onto the metal folding chair by the dryer. Her knees were trembling now, and her chest felt tight from holding herself upright. Duke came to her, nudging her hand until she breathed more evenly. "I'm all right," she told him. He did not believe her, but he let her say it. Then she pulled the old tag out again. "Buddy. Pine Rest Motel. DKW." Her initials were not DKW. They were NEW. Nora stared until the letters blurred. She had assumed the scratch marks were hers because age made people doubt themselves before anyone else had to. But they were not her initials. DKW belonged to someone else. The name came slowly, like a penny rising through deep water. Darlene K. Ward. Darlene had been the night clerk for one winter. She wore red lipstick and hated strays near the vending machines because she said dogs scared guests. Nora remembered Darlene standing in the office. The night Buddy disappeared. She remembered Miguel crying. And now she remembered one more thing. Darlene had left Pine Rest the same week. Buddy vanished, with no goodbye and no final paycheck Nora ever saw processed. Duke turned suddenly toward the row of dryers. A soft tapping came from behind the last machine. Duke walked to the dryer, sniffed the base, and looked back at Nora. The last machine had been broken since before Caleb bought the place. Mr. Hanley always said. The vent behind it rattled in bad weather, and Nora had believed him because some sounds become part of a building until nobody questions them. But Duke was not listening to the rattle. He was smelling something. Nora rose slowly and gripped the edge of the folding table. Behind the dryer, half hidden by lint and shadow, the vent cover sat crooked. One screw was newer than the others. Fresh, shiny. Wrong. The tag had been inside the blanket. The closet had a new lock. The vent had a new screw. And tomorrow, the county office would come with papers that might remove both her and Duke before she understood what Pine Rest had been trying to forget. Duke pressed his nose to the crooked vent and gave one short, urgent bark. This time, Nora did not tell him to be quiet. Nora did not have the strength to move the dryer by herself. 20 years earlier, she would have pulled it out with one shoulder and one foot braced on the wall. She had done that with machines, mattresses, and stubborn men who thought a laundry room was invisible because women worked in it. But her hands were not 20 years younger. Her right knee had been swollen since dawn. So Nora did the one thing people kept forgetting she still knew how to do. She used the room. Nora took the wooden doorstop from under the supply shelf, wedged it beneath the front leg of the broken dryer, and leaned her weight against the side. It shifted less than an inch. Duke watched her. "Anxious?" "I know," she whispered, "not smart. But neither is leaving the truth behind a machine." She rested, counted her breaths, then pushed again. The dryer scraped forward with a sound that made her teeth ache. Behind it, the crooked vent cover came fully into view. It was just a square of dented metal, with a line of dust around 3 old screws, and one bright new one. The fresh screw had been forced in at an angle, as if somebody had opened the vent recently and rushed to close it again. Nora reached for the screwdriver she kept in her sewing tin, a small flathead Herald, used to tighten eyeglasses. Her fingers slipped twice. Duke pressed his side against her calf. I am not falling, she told him. Still, she let him steady her. The first old screw turned easily. The second squealed. The new one fought back. Outside, Caleb's men laughed near the dumpster. A trash lid slammed. The sound made her move faster than she should have. At last, the vent cover dropped into her lap. A breath of cold air came through the opening. Duke lowered his head and sniffed. Then he sneezed, not from dust, from mildew, paper, and old leather. Nora reached inside. Her fingers touched lint first, then a brittle corner of cardboard, then something wrapped in a motel hand towel that had gone gray with age. She pulled it free. The towel was tied with a strip of faded red fabric. Nora knew that fabric too. A piece of the employee scarf Darlene K. Ward wore on rainy nights. Duke nudged her wrist. The knot came loose after several tries. Inside was a small plastic pouch, yellowed and cracked along the edges. It held three things: a Polaroid photograph, a motel receipt, and another dog tag. This one was brass, bent slightly near the hole. Buddy's second tag. Nora did not touch it at first. The first tag in her pocket had said Buddy and Pine Rest Motel. This one had a phone number, almost rubbed smooth, and a name scratched across the back. Miguel. Nora's throat tightened. The Polaroid showed Miguel, standing beside the vending machines, smiling with one arm around a young German shepherd's neck. The dog's ears were too large for his head, and his eyes still trusted people. Behind Miguel, half in the office doorway, was Darlene K. Ward. Her hand was on Buddy's collar. Nora turned the receipt over. Pine Rest Motel. Pet cleaning fee. Paid cash. Guest room 6. The date was the same week Buddy vanished. At the bottom, written in hurried blue ink, were 4 words. Dog removed after complaint. No signature, no explanation. Just a sentence that had cost a child his best friend. Nora sat back against the wall. The laundry room seemed to tilt. Duke leaned into her hard enough to keep her upright. You were not Duke yet, she whispered. But you knew that smell. He sniffed the brass tag and gave a low, grieving whine. Nora understood then. Not all at once, but like a towel soaking through. Buddy had not run away. Someone had taken him from the motel after a guest complained. Maybe Darlene arranged it. But the hidden pouch proved one thing. Miguel had not imagined the dog. Nora had not imagined the promise. And the old blanket had carried the first half of the truth, because someone had been afraid to throw all of it away. A shadow crossed the window. Nora shoved the pouch under her sweater. Just as Caleb opened the laundry room door, he saw the vent cover in her lap. For the first time, his politeness fell away. What did you find? He asked. Nora took one slow breath. Dust. That is motel property. Dust usually is. He walked toward her. Duke stepped in front of Nora. This time he did not bark. He stood square, head low, eyes fixed on Caleb's hands. Caleb stopped, moved the dog. No, Nora. She looked up at him. You used my first name. Because you want to sound kind while taking what belongs to me. His jaw tightened. Anything found inside this building belongs to the property. Then, why are you scared of what I found? He glanced toward the vent. That glance was enough. Nora had spent years reading small evidence. A rust stain, a missing towel, curtains that still held smoke after a guest denied it. Caleb knew about the vent. Maybe not the whole story, but enough. He said, the county office will not care about old motel clutter. Mrs. Alvarez will. She is not part of this process. She was part of this place. From the open doorway came a woman's voice, sharp with age and breath. Yes, I was. Caleb turned. Lena Alvarez stood on the walkway, with one hand on her daughter's arm and the other gripping a cane. She was smaller than Nora remembered. Her silver hair pulled back, but her eyes were clear. Duke's tail moved once. He knew kindness when it entered a room. Lena looked at the dryer, then at Nora on the floor, then at the vent. Oh, Lord, she whispered. You found where she hid it. Caleb went still. Where who hid it? Nora asked. Lena looked at Caleb, then back at Nora. Darlene, she said. The night clerk, she told people. The dog ran off, but I saw her with him by room 6. I was too scared to say it then. Nora felt years press against her chest. Why? Scared. Lena's mouth trembled. Because my work papers were not settled. Because my boy needed food. Because people like Darlene knew which women could be threatened into silence. The laundry room became very quiet. Lena took one step inside. Michael never forgave me for leaving. Without Buddy, he thought I gave up on him. I told him grown-up things, money things, fear things, but he was a child. All he heard was that I did not fight for his dog. Nora pulled the pouch from her sweater and held it out. Lena's cane slipped slightly as she reached for the Polaroid. When she saw Michael's face, her breath broke. That was his whole heart, she said. Duke lowered himself beside Nora, his old blanket under one paw, Buddy's tags between them. The vent had not solved everything. It had opened a wound, and now that wound had a witness. The pouch did not stay in Lena Alvera's hands for long. Caleb reached for it before anyone gave him permission. Duke rose so quickly that the blanket slid from his paw. He did not snap. He did not lunge. He simply placed his body between Caleb's shoes and Lena's shaking hands, and the movement said more than a bark could have. Caleb stopped with his hand in the air. Lena's daughter, Marisol, stepped closer. Do not touch that. I need to secure motel property, Caleb said. Nora almost laughed, but there was no joy in it. You keep using the word property for every living thing that makes you uncomfortable. The brass tag lay in Lena's palm. The scratched letters Miggle caught the laundry room light. Caleb looked from the tag to the Polaroid, then to Nora. This has nothing to do with your occupancy. It has everything to do with why you marked my dog's blanket as trash. I did not mark it personally, but you ordered it thrown out. I ordered old materials cleared without looking. His face hardened. Mrs. Whitfield, you are creating a story out of sentimental objects. Lena raised her head. Her voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of a woman who had been swallowing words for decades. No, the story was created when people lied to a child. Caleb turned toward her. Mrs. Alvarez, with respect, this is not relevant to the county review. Respect does not sound like that, Lena said. Nora touched Duke's shoulder, partly to calm him and partly to calm herself. The first tag in her pocket, the second tag in Lena's hand, the photograph, the receipt, the vent. Each piece mattered, but none of it was enough by itself. Nora knew how records worked. Truth did not become sturdy because one object shone. It became sturdy when pieces leaned against each other. Where are the old ledgers? Nora asked. Caleb's answer came too fast. Gone. Lena looked at the locked supply closet. No, they are not. Caleb's eyes flashed. You do not know that. I know Mr. Hanley, Lena said. He kept everything: broken toasters, guest cards, invoices, payroll stubs. That man kept boxes of keys that did not open anything anymore. Nora looked at the silver lock, a new lock on an old door. Duke had known. He had smelled something behind it. Old paper, leather, dust, maybe the same red scarf fabric tied around the pouch. Nora reached into her cardigan pocket and pulled out the folded notice Caleb had given her. You say, room 12 is not my home, because there is no record, she said. You say the blanket is trash, because nobody checked what was inside. You say Buddy ran off because that was the easy sentence written down. You are building a whole eviction out of missing records and calling it management. Caleb lowered his voice. Be careful. Duke's ears moved forward. Nora did not step back. I have been careful my whole life, she said. Careful with other people's sheets, other people's children, other people's secrets. Maybe careful is how men with keys get to keep deciding what women remember. Marisol lifted her phone. I am recording now. Caleb turned sharply. You do not have permission to record on private property. Then call the county office, Marisol said. The same one you said was coming tomorrow. For the first time, Caleb looked trapped between his own words. Nora saw it and did not waste the opening. I want that closet opened with witnesses present, she said. No. Then we wait for the county. You may wait off the property. Lena's cane struck the floor. She is not leaving this room while you still have the records locked away. Caleb looked at the three women, then at Duke. Outside, one of his men called, You want us to load the last cabinet? No, Caleb snapped. Leave it. The sharpness gave him away. Nora turned toward the cabinet, leaning near the dumpster. The cabinet from the laundry room. The one that had held Duke's blanket. Its bottom drawer was half open. Duke saw where she looked. Before anyone could stop him, he trotted past Caleb, out the door, and straight toward the cabinet. Duke, Nora called. The dog did not come back. He pressed his nose under the bottom drawer and pushed. The drawer scraped wider. Then he gripped something with his teeth and pulled it free. It was not paper. It was a narrow strip of red fabric, faded and stiff, the same fabric that had tied the pouch behind the vent. Duke carried it back carefully and dropped it at Nora's feet. Lena covered her mouth. That is Darlene's scarf, she said. She tore it that night. Nora bent slowly, picked up the strip, and turned it over. Something had been written on the back in black laundry marker, mostly faded but still readable. 6. Complaint. Dog. Paid. The words were not a confession. They were not a legal document. But they were one more piece leaning against the others. The receipt had guest room 6. The Polaroid showed Darlene with Buddy. The tag had Miguel's name. The scarf strip mentioned a complaint and payment. And the pouch had been hidden behind a vent in the room, where Nora had wrapped a frightened German shepherd in a blue blanket and promised a crying boy that the truth would not disappear. Caleb stared at the fabric as if it had betrayed him. Old markings prove nothing, he said. No, Nora said. They asked the next question. Lena's daughter nodded. Who stayed in room 6? Caleb said nothing. Nora looked again at the locked closet. The old guest ledger would know. The air changed. Even the dryers seemed to hold their breaths. Caleb's phone buzzed. He looked down, then away. Whatever message he saw made his mouth flatten. The county review has been moved up, he said. They will be here in 2 hours? Lena's grip tightened around the Polaroid. Marisol kept recording. Nora felt the room tilt again. Not from weakness this time, but from the speed of things. 2 hours was not enough to untangle decades, or prove that a woman's memory was not clutter, but it was enough to keep digging. Duke went back to the supply closet. He lowered himself in front of the new lock and laid his head on his paws. Then he looked at Nora, not with fear, with patience. The same patience he had shown as a starving stray behind the dumpster, waiting to learn whether the hand reaching toward him would hurt or help. Nora picked up the red strip of fabric and stood as straight as her knees allowed. Caleb, she said, open the closet. He looked at Duke, then at the phone in Marisol's hand, then at Lena Alvarez holding the photograph of her son. No, he said. But his voice no longer sounded like a man enforcing order. It sounded like a man protecting a door. The county review arrived in a white sedan with a cracked county seal on the door. The woman who stepped out was not cruel, and that made Nora more afraid. Cruel people were easy to recognize. Tired people with procedures could do damage while believing they were being fair. Her name was Denise Harper. She wore flat shoes, a brown coat, and the careful expression of someone already tired before lunch. Caleb met her halfway across the parking lot. Nora caught only pieces. Unauthorized residence. Animal concern, elder vult evocate. Each phrase landed like another label slapped onto the wrong box. Duke stayed in front of the locked supply closet. Lena sat on the folding chair. Marisol stood beside her with the phone ready. Denise entered the laundry room and looked around. Her eyes moved over the shifted dryer, the vent cover, the old blanket, the red scarf strip, and Duke lying in front of the locked door. "Mrs. Whitfield?" she asked. "Yes, I am Denise Harper with County Housing Compliance." Mr. Mercer requested a same-day review. Adult Services. There it was, the softest phrase in the room and maybe the sharpest. Denise looked at Duke. "Is he your dog?" "He is." "Does he bite?" "Not unless a sandwich is careless." Lena almost laughed. Caleb did not. Denise turned to him. "You stated the animal was interfering with property removal. He has blocked staff repeatedly." "He blocked a locked closet," Nora said. Denise lifted a hand, one thing at a time. Reasonable terrified Nora, because it could still end with Duke in a shelter kennel. Caleb handed Denise a folder. "The unit is a motel room. There is no lease, no current employment record, no pet agreement, and no written permission for long-term occupancy." Denise opened the folder. Nora watched her read. There was nothing dramatic in it, just blank spaces where Nora life should have been. No lease, no agreement, no record, no value. Denise looked up. "Mrs. Whitfield, how long have you slept in room 12? "Since Harold died." "What year was that?" Nora knew the year, but Caleb's eyes were on her, waiting for hesitation. Duke raised his head. Nora placed one hand on his back, and the feel of his fur steadied the calendar in her mind. 2018, she said. "October. First frost came early. The heater knocked all night. Mr. Hanley brought me coffee, because I had forgotten to eat." Denise wrote something down, Caleb said again. "There is no record of permission." Lena's voice came from the chair. "Because Mr. Hanley kept records in that closet." Denise turned. "And you are Lena Alvarez. I worked housekeeping here. My son is in that photograph. His dog was taken from this motel and hidden in records people hoped would disappear." Caleb exhaled. "This is not relevant." Denise looked at the Polaroid. "It may be relevant to why records are being withheld. For the first time." Caleb did not answer quickly. Denise nodded toward the locked door. "Mr. Mercer, what is in the closet?" "Old operational material." "Does it include employment records, guest ledgers, or prior owner correspondence?" "I have not inventoried everything." "Then you cannot say there is no record." Caleb's mouth tightened. "I can say there is no record in the active files." Denise tried the handle. "The new lock-held key?" she asked. Caleb hesitated. "Mr. Mercer," Denise said, "you requested official review. Open it." He pulled a key ring from his pocket. There were too many keys on it for a man who claimed old things were useless. The lock clicked. A smell came out first. Dust, paper, cardboard, metal, and old damp carpet. Inside the closet were boxes stacked to the ceiling. One written in Mr. Hanley. "S-slanted black marker," said Misk. "Promises." Nora covered her mouth. She knew that handwriting. Denise pointed to the box. "Bring that one down." Caleb did not move, Marisol did. She lifted the box carefully and set it on the folding table. Dust puffed up. Duke sneezed, then rested his chin near the corner. Inside were envelopes, motel keys, old Polaroids, handwritten notes, and a small ledger with a cracked green cover. On the first page, Mr. Hanley had written things. "I agreed to that decent people should remember." Nora's eyes filled. They turned pages slowly. There were notes about a family allowed to stay during a flood, a veteran whose room rate had been cut in half, and a housekeeper paid early after surgery. Then, near the middle, a page was dated shortly after Harold died. "Nora Whitfield may remain in room 12 and use rear laundry storage as long as she needs. She worked here 27 years and kept this place human. Duke stays with her. Do not separate them." The room went silent. Nora did not cry right away. The truth was too simple, too small, and too late. Just a few lines in a green ledger, sitting behind a door, while people talked about her like a problem. Denise took a photograph of the page. Caleb said, "That is not a formal lease." "No," Denise said, "but it contradicts your claim that no permission existed." Nora looked at Duke. Duke looked back as if he had known the closet held more than dust. "What about Buddy?" Lena whispered. Nora turned another page. There, folded between two entries, was an envelope with Miguel Rivera's name written across the front. Inside was a short letter from Mr. Hanley. "Miguel, if this ever reaches you, I am sorry I did not act fast enough. Buddy did not run away. A guest in room 6 paid Darlene to remove him after a complaint. Nora found out too late and kept asking questions. I kept the tags because I was ashamed." Lena made a sound that broke everyone in the room. The hidden tags had not only proved a dog was taken, they proved Nora had not invented the old promise. They proved she had been the one who kept asking after everyone else decided. Silence was easier. Denise placed the letter beside the tags, the receipt, the Polaroid, and the scarf strip. The pieces leaned together at last. Denise turned to Caleb. "The removal notice is suspended pending review. Nothing from room 12 or this laundry area is to be discarded." Nora heard the words. Suspended, not saved. Pending review, not justice yet. Still, it was the first official sentence that had not treated her like clutter. Duke stepped forward, picked up the blue blanket, and laid it gently over Nora's feet. Denise watched him. Then she said, softer, "That dog seems to understand evidence better than most people." Nora touched Duke's head. "No," she said. "He understands what people throw away." Denise Harper did not leave after suspending the notice. She cleared the folding table and placed each item in a row. The green ledger, Mr. Hanley's letter, 2 old dog tags, the Polaroid of Miguel, the room 6 receipt, the strip of red scarf, Duke's old blue blanket. Nora watched the evidence become visible under the light and understood why people with power liked folders. A folder could make a life look orderly or make everything important disappear. Denise photographed every piece. Caleb stood near the doorway with his arms folded, saying less now, which made him no less dangerous. A polite man could still make an 82-year-old woman sound safer somewhere else. Lena's hands were shaking from blood sugar, age, and the cost of holding back grief for too long. "Sit," Nora told her. Lena looked ready to protest. Nora pointed to the chair. "I am still bossy in this room." Lena sat. Duke walked to the water bowl by the laundry sink, drank slowly, then came back and rested beside Nora's shoes. His breath was heavier than it had been that morning. "You need a rest too," Nora whispered. Duke looked away, pretending he had not heard. She took 2 dog biscuits from her cardigan pocket, broke one in half because his teeth were not what they had been, and held it flat in her palm. He ate gently, then licked her fingers once. Denise returned to the ledger. "Mrs. Whitfield," she said, "this entry supports prior permission. It does not create a simple answer, but it changes the review." Caleb seized the wording. "Exactly. It does not create legal tenancy." Denise looked at him. "It creates a duty to stop treating her belongings as abandoned property while we verify." Nora liked that word, verify. Not believe blindly, not dismiss, verify. For years, people had acted as if age made her memory a fog and their paperwork a sunrise. But verification meant both sides had to stand in the same light. Lena leaned forward. "What about Miguel?" Denise touched Mr. Hanley's letter. "This supports Mrs. Whitfield's account. The rest may need family contact, local records, maybe the old employment file if it exists." "It exists," Nora said. Everyone looked at her. Memory had opened another drawer inside her. "Mr. Hanley kept employee files by year," she said. "Not in boxes. In the metal cabinet with the dented side." Caleb's face tightened. Nora turned toward the cabinet by the dumpster. "The one your men nearly loaded." Denise said, "Bring it in." Marisol tried first, but the cabinet was too heavy. A young maintenance man helped drag it back into the laundry room. The bottom drawer stuck. It had always stuck. Nora almost smiled through her exhaustion. "Lift before you pull," she said. The young man lifted the handle. The drawer slid open with a screech. Inside were hanging folders. curled from damp but still readable. Payroll, incident reports, guest complaints, employee notes. Darlene K. Ward. Lena stopped breathing when Denise lifted that folder. Inside was a copy of a resignation note unsigned, and a handwritten incident slip dated the night Buddy disappeared. Complaint from room 6, regarding stray dog near vending machines. Darlene to remove animal from guest area. Cash fee accepted for cleaning. Follow-up needed. There was a second note below it, written 2 days later, in Mr. Hanley's hand. Follow-up not completed. Nora says dog did not leave on his own. Miguel Rivera asking daily, speak to Darlene. Nora closed her eyes. She had asked Daly too, knocking on the office door, telling Mr. Hanley that Buddy would not have abandoned Miguel. But life had a way of punishing women who kept asking. A week later, Harold fell from the porch steps, and Nora spent months between work, hospital halls, and the small tasks of keeping a marriage alive. Miguel was gone by then. Buddy was gone. Darlene was gone. And the story hardened into the easy version. The dog ran off. The boy moved away. The old laundry woman was too attached to strays. Denise added the incident, slipped to the row. Lena whispered, he thought, I chose my job over him. Nora looked at her. You chose survival. My son was 11. He could not understand that then. Maybe now he can. Lena shook her head. I do not know where he is. Marisol spoke quietly. I might. Her mother turned. Marisol held up her phone. A Miguel Rivera sent me a message 2 years ago, after Aunt Rosa died. I never answered. Lena pressed one hand to her chest. Nora felt the old room gather itself around them. Dryers silent. Dust floating. Duke breathing. A hidden dog tag on the table. A mother afraid to hope. Marisol scrolled with her thumb, then stopped. He lives in Ohio, she said. He works with rescue dogs. Lena bowed her head. It was not justice yet. It was not forgiveness. It was a door, and some doors opened only a crack after being painted shut for years. Call him, Nora said. Lena looked at Denise, then at Caleb, then at the evidence on the table. I cannot do that here. Yes, you can, Nora said. This room has held the silence long enough. Marisol pressed the number. The phone rang through speaker, once, twice, 3 times. Duke lifted his head at the sound, ears tilted, as if some part of him recognized that waiting had become the work of the room. A man answered. Hello? Lena covered her mouth. Marisol's voice trembled. Miguel? It is Marisol. I am with your mother. There was silence. Then the man said, older and guarded, is she all right? Lena reached for the phone. Me, Joe? She whispered. The word broke in the air. Nora looked away, giving them the small privacy a laundry room could offer. She watched Caleb instead. He was staring at the evidence table, but not like a man moved by grief, like a man calculating risk. Then he looked at the green ledger again, at the page that said Nora and Duke could stay, at Denise Harper, who was photographing everything. And Nora understood the next danger. Caleb did not need to win the whole truth. He only needed to make the place seem unsafe enough that the county would remove her anyway. As Lena cried softly into the phone, Caleb stepped outside and made a call of his own. Nora could not hear the words, but Duke could hear the tone. His head turned toward the open door. The fur along his shoulders lifted. Nora followed his gaze and saw Caleb looking back at room 12. Not at the laundry room, not at the closet. At her little room with the pill organizer, the soup cans, Harold's coat, and Duke's as food tin. The evidence had saved the blanket. It had opened the closet. It had found Miguel. But Nora's home was still the easiest thing to take. Denise Harper saw. Caleb's eyes moved toward room 12 too. That was the difference between a tired official and a careless one. She did not only read papers. She watched where people looked when they thought no one was noticing. Mr. Mercer, she called. Caleb slipped the phone into his pocket. Yes? Who were you calling, my maintenance contractor? For what purpose? to assess safety concerns in the occupied unit. Nora felt the word occupied land differently this time. Not unauthorized. Not cluttered occupied. Denise closed the green ledger. Nobody is entering room 12 without Mrs. Whitfield's consent while I am present. Caleb gave a small, patient smile. With respect, if the room is unsafe, I have a duty to inspect Mrs. Nora, the man said. Yes, you told me you would find out. I tried, Nora said. I did not try hard enough. There was a long silence, then Miggle said, I was a child. I thought every adult who failed me had chosen to. I did not know. Some adults were failing under the weight of other things. Nora looked at Duke's old blanket on the table. I should have found you. I should have come back. Neither sentence repaired the years, but they met in the middle of them. Miguel's voice changed. My mother says you saved another German shepherd after that. Nora rested her hand on Duke's head. He saved me back. Duke leaned into her palms. Caleb's maintenance truck arrived. 20 minutes later, two men stepped out carrying tool bags, and the kind of confidence that came from being called to support a decision already made. One looked toward room 12. The other looked at Duke and frowned. Animal hazard? He asked. Duke yawned. Nora almost smiled. Denise stepped into the walkway before Caleb could answer. No inspection until I complete documentation. Caleb's voice sharpened the heater. In room 12 is old. The sink leaks. There may be electrical issues. I cannot allow an elderly woman to remain in unsafe conditions. There it was. Concern sharpened into a tool. Nora turned toward her little room. Yes, the heater clanked. Yes, the sink dripped. Yes, the curtain rod sagged because she had tied it with string. But there was food on the shelf. Clean water in Duke's bowl, medicine sorted by day, a working lamp, and a quilt over the bed. It was poor, it was worn, it was hers. Denise looked at Nora. May I see the room with you present? Nora nodded once. Yes, with Duke. Caleb opened his mouth. Denise stopped him with one look with Duke. They crossed the cracked walkway together. Nora unlocked room 12 herself. That mattered, her hand on the key, her choice, her door. Inside, the room seemed embarrassed to be inspected. The narrow bed was made. Harold's coat hung on the hook. Duke's newer blanket lay folded at the foot. The soup can stood on the table beside peanut butter, bread, Duke's food tin, and a plastic jug of water. Her pill organizer sat next to a small notebook, where she wrote when she took each dose, because forgetting a pill was not the same as losing her mind. Denise noticed the notebook. She noticed the dog food. She noticed the clean bowl, the heater, the lamp, the taped window, the stack of motel towels. Nora had folded without being asked. Caleb pointed to the ceiling corner. Water stain old, Nora said, from before Christmas. Possible mold. Duke walked to Harold's coat and sat beneath it. Nora followed his gaze. The coat had been on that hook since Harold died. Not because Nora lived in the past, but because some things helped Upper Room remember love. In the left pocket were Harold's old gloves. In the right, a folded paper napkin from the last diner breakfast they ever shared. Caleb looked at the coat as if it were clutter that should be removed from the wall near a heat source. Nora's voice went quiet. It is nowhere near the heater. Still, personal items can create hazards. Duke stood, not toward Caleb, toward the coat. He pressed his nose into the lower hem and sniffed with sudden focus. Nora frowned. Duke? The dog pawed gently at the coat. Caleb sighed. Now he is damaging clothing. He is telling me something, Nora said. Caleb rolled his eyes before he could stop himself. Denise saw that too. Nora took the coat from the hook. It was heavier than she remembered. She laid it on the bed and touched the hem Duke had found. There was a hard line inside the lining. Not a tag, not a coin. A folded envelope sewn into a hidden pocket. Harold had made for cash when his hand still worked steady. Nora opened the pocket with her small scissors. The envelope was addressed in Mr. Hanley's handwriting. Nora and Harold. Inside was a duplicate of the same promise from the ledger, but more personal. Nora, if I go before, this is settled. Room 12 is yours for as long as you need it. You kept this motel alive when I could not. Duke stays. The laundry room storage stays. No one is to throw away the blue blanket. Below that was Harold, shaky signature as witness. Nora sat down hard on the bed. The hidden dog tag had saved a memory. The vent had saved a boyish truth. The closet had saved a record. And Harold's coat had saved her right to be believed by the one person who knew how afraid she was of becoming homeless after he died. Denise read the letter carefully. Caleb said, again informal. Denise looked at him, again relevant. Duke rested his chin on Nora's knee. Miggle's voice came faintly from Marisol's phone in the doorway. Mrs. Nora? Nora lifted her head. Caleb stepped back out onto the walkway, his face pale with anger. Denise followed him. Nora did not hear everything, but she heard enough. This review is not supporting immediate removal, Denise said. Caleb answered, then I will pursue redevelopment clearance through another channel. Nora closed her eyes. There was always another channel for people who wanted an old woman gone. But when she opened them, Duke was still there. The blue blanket was still there. The ledger, the tags, the letter, the photograph, the scarf, and Harold's coat were no longer separate scraps of memory. They had become a wall. Not a loud wall, not a cruel wall, a quiet one. The kind Nora had built all her life out of folded towels, kept promises, and small acts no one recorded until the day someone tried to erase her. Denise Harper stayed until the sun dropped behind the faded motel signs along the highway. By then, the Pine Rest looked different to everyone in the cracked parking lot. Not repaired, just seen. The removal notice had been withdrawn from Nora's door. Denise did not pretend that one afternoon could settle every question about ownership, tenancy, or old promises written in forgotten ledgers. She was careful with her words, careful enough that Caleb could not twist them. Room 12 would remain occupied while the county reviewed the documents. The laundry room would be preserved. The locked closet would be inventoried with witnesses. Duke would not be removed. Those were not grand words. They were not the kind that made a crowd cheer. But Nora had lived long enough to know that quiet justice often arrived, wearing flat shoes, carrying a clipboard, and saying, not today. Caleb Mercer stood near the office with his hands in his pockets. He no longer smiled. The maintenance men loaded nothing. The cabinet stayed. The blue blanket stayed. And for the first time in years, Room 12 looked less like a place waiting to be cleared, and more like a small life that had survived. Miguel Rivera arrived the next morning. He drove through the night from Ohio in a dented pickup with a rescue crate in the back. He was no longer the boy in the Polaroid. His hair had silver at the temples, and his scarred hands were gentle, in the way of people who work with frightened animals. Lena was waiting in the laundry room when he walked in. For one terrible second, neither of them moved. Then Miguel crossed the room and folded his mother into his arms. Nora looked down at Duke, because some reunions belonged first to the people who had lost them. Duke leaned against her knee when Miguel knelt in front of him and held out his hands. Duke sniffed once, then placed his chin in Miguel's palm. Miguel closed his eyes. Buddy would have liked you, he whispered. They laid the evidence on the folding table one final time, not to fight Caleb, not to prove Nora was sane, but to give Miguel the truth he had carried as a wound. The 2 tags, the Polaroid, the receipt, the scarf strip, the incident slip, Mr. Hanley's letter, the green ledger, and the blue blanket that Duke had refused to let the trash take. Miguel picked up the brass tag with his name scratched on the back. I thought I made him bigger in my mind, he said. Maybe I remembered him better than he was because I was lonely. Nora shook her head. He was worth remembering. Lena said, so were you. Miguel looked at his mother. and the years between them did not vanish. But they moved a little, making room for something else to breathe. Later that week, Denise returned with copies of the documents and a temporary written agreement requiring Caleb to preserve room 12 and the laundry storage until the review ended. It protected a person long enough for her to speak. Caleb was not dragged away. No one shouted at him in the parking lot. He simply lost the easiest version of the story. He could no longer say Nora had no proof. He could no longer say the blanket was trash. He could no longer say Duke was only an animal causing trouble. A month later, the laundry room door received a new sign. Not fancy, just a small wooden plaque made by a man from the hardware store who still remembered Nora folding towels for his father. It read, "The Buddy Room." Below it, in smaller letters, for the ones who were not thrown away. Michael had asked for Buddy's name. Lena had asked for the second line. Nora had asked for no picture of herself. Marisol ignored that last part, just enough to hang the old Polaroid beside the plaque, with a new photograph underneath it. In the new photograph, Lena stood beside Miguel. Nora sat in the folding chair with Duke's head in her lap. The blue blanket lay across his back, like a small flag of stubborn love. When Nora saw the photograph, she sighed. "I look old," Michael smiled. "You are old." Lena smacked his arm. Nora laughed so hard Duke lifted his head in concern. "I am allowed to be old," she said. That became the sentence people remembered. Not because it was clever, but because it was true. Nora was allowed to be old. Allowed to be slow. Allowed to keep a coat on a hook because love had once worn it. Allowed to feed her dog from a tin on the table. Allowed to remember a boy, a stray, a promise, and a room full of steam and lint. Allowed to say no when people called her life a liability. Winter came early that year. The heater in room 12 still knocked, but Caleb had it repaired. The sink stopped dripping. The taped window was replaced. Duke slept more after that. He no longer rose at every footstep outside the door. Some evenings, he lay on his newer blanket, while the old blue one rested, folded beside him. But when Nora walked to the buddy room, Duke always came with her. Slowly, proudly, he would nose the plaque, sniff the photographs, then settle beneath it, as if guarding the place had become easier now that the truth was not hidden. Nora kept a jar of dog biscuits on the folding table for guests who came to hear the story. She did not call it a true story for strangers. She called it a lesson about old rooms, women who were talked over, and dogs who noticed what people threw away. A lesson about how memory should be checked before it is dismissed, and how dignity can live inside a blanket, a coat, a tag, or a room that still smells faintly of soap. One evening, Miguel stood in the doorway after visiting his mother. "Mrs. Nora," he said, "why did Duke keep the blanket?" Nora looked at the German shepherd sleeping beneath the plaque. "Because I kept him," she said. And sometimes love teaches a creature what to guard. Outside, cars passed on the highway, rushing toward brighter hotels with newer signs. At the Pine Rest, the old laundry room glowed with a single warm bulb. Nora locked the door herself that night, her hand on the key, her dog beside her, her name still attached to the place. And when she returned to room 12, Duke circled once, lay down on the blue blanket, and finally slept without watching the door. The truth had not made Nora young again. It had not returned every lost year. It had not undone Miguel's childhood grief, or Lena's silence, or the small humiliations Nora had swallowed while polite people questioned her mind. But it had done something quieter. It had put things back where they belonged. The tag with the boy, the blanket with the dog, the promise with the woman who kept it, and the word home back on a room others had tried to empty.